From the Presidential Palace, Manila, Dateline Malacañang.
Good day, this is Dateline Malacañang, and here are the news. Malacañang said Wednesday that the country's economic managers will determine the possible rates of the proposed oil excise tax cut should Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. exercise his emergency powers amid tensions in the Middle East. Speaking to reporters, Communications Undersecretary and Palace Press Officer Attorney Claire Castro said President Marcos would consult his economic team if he decides to reduce excise tax on petroleum products once Dubai crude exceeds $80 per barrel. Castro said President Marcos cannot suspend the imposition of mandatory excise taxes on all oil and fuel products unless Congress passes a nulo. Under Republic Act or RA 10963 or the Tax Reform for Acceleration and Inclusion or TRAIN law, excise taxes on petroleum products were implemented in 3 tranches from January 1, 2018 to January 1, 2020. RA 10964 also provides for the automatic suspension of the excise tax increase if the average Dubai crude oil price reaches or exceeds $80 per barrel. Castro explained that the provision covered only the 2018 to 2020 period. She said President Marcos may certify as urgent a proposed measure seeking a new authority to reduce excise taxes, noting that it is timely. She also echoed President Marcos' assurance that the excise tax cut proposal would only be temporary. Amid tensions in the Middle East, President Marcos on Tuesday assured the public that the country has sufficient oil supply with stockpiles ranging from 29 to 67.5 days depending on the product. President Marcos also expressed the government's readiness should Dubai crude range between $80 and $90 per barrel for 2 months.
Wala pong napag-usapan kung gaano kalaki, kung gaano kababa. Basta ang gusto lamang po niya sana ay magkaroon po siya ng power, pero temporary lamang po ito. At sa panahon po na ganito, na biglaan po may nangyayaring ganitong hidwaan, kinakailangan din po tayo makaagapay sa ating mga kababayan, lalo kung sobrang taas po ng presyo po ng krudo. Wala pong napag-usapan kahapon at makikinig naman din po siya sa mga economic team kung ano yung pinakamaganda po na reduction rate. Of course, mag-a-adjust din po. At sabi naman po ng Pangulo, ito'y temporary. Para lang po makaagapay tayo kung darating po talaga na sobrang mahihirapan po ang ating mga kababayan sa pagtaas po ng presyo ng krudo. Sa huli natin pong pakikipag-usap, ang sabi po sa atin kapag ka po nag-lift or nag-suspend po ng excise tax ay dapat po 2018 to 2020. So sa ngayon po ay hindi po siya umiiral, kaya po ninanais po ng Pangulo na magkaroon ng panibagong batas para po mabigyan siya ng authority na ma-reduce ang excise tax.
Communications Undersecretary and Palace Press Officer Attorney Claire Castro.
Dateline Malacañang.
The Department of Migrant Workers or DMW and the Overseas Workers Welfare Administration or OWA said 1,824 overseas Filipino workers or OFWs affected by the escalating tension in the Middle East region have received on-site assistance from the Philippine government. In a press briefing in Mandaluyong City, Migrant Workers Secretary Hans Leo Cacdac assured that the government is all hands on deck following Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr.'s directive to look for the welfare and protection and assist affected OFWs and their families. OWA Chief Patricia Yvonne Kaunan said assistance includes food, hygiene kits, temporary shelter and accommodation, welfare checks, hospital visits, and addressing repatriation and evacuation inquiries. On-site assistance means aid given to OFWs in the country where they work. Kakdak said currently around 236 OFWs stranded in various international airports like Hong Kong, Singapore, Malaysia, Manchester in the United Kingdom, Rome, and even in Eastern Africa also received aid. He said of those stranded, 22 OFWs in Addis Ababa Bole International Airport or ADD in Ethiopia have been rebooked and are now scheduled to return to the country. Kakdak said the DMW and OWA are in constant communication with the Filipino communities in the affected countries, including Qatar, Bahrain, Israel, and Kuwait, through online meetings to check on their situation. Kaunan said 1,189 OFWs from the affected countries have so far expressed intent to be repatriated.
But right now, the Secretary mentioned that we have already assisted in on-site, meaning doon po sa affected region in the Middle East, 1,824 OFWs, which means we have provided food assistance, hygiene kit. Some would need financial assistance dahil nawalan ng trabaho or kailangan po talagang tulungan yung distressed worker. Provided shelter and accommodation, welfare check, address the inquiries when it comes to the request for repatriation, evacuation, hospital visits. So the total, as mentioned by our secretary, of all the OFWs we have assisted on site as of now is 1,824. So the total repatriation request as of now received from the OFWs is 1,189. 1,189. Yung numbers po na meron kami, real time po yan. Kasi po 24/7 yung monitoring natin. So as we speak, it's 1,189. And meron po dito is from Bahrain, Israel, Kuwait, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Lebanon, okay, Qatar, at doon po sa iba pang lugar na natatanggap natin. Meron din po tayo natatanggap from our offices here of DMW and OWA.
Kakdak, however, cited the pronouncement of President Marcos that this is not as yet the time to undertake a government-sponsored mass repatriation effort, citing the closure of airspace in many affected Gulf states in Israel. He said the Philippine government does not want to place any foreign citizens or OFWs in danger as the country undertakes repatriation. He assured the government is ready to bring the affected OFWs back home. Secretary Kakdak said alternative options, including land evacuation, are being explored in coordination with the Department of Foreign Affairs or DFA, the Department of the National Defense or DND, and host country authorities for the repatriation. The DMW, together with the Embassy of Israel in the Philippines, is working to bring home the remains of Mary Ann De Vera, an OFW who died after being hit by debris while moving with her ward to a shelter. He said restrictions are still in place in Tel Aviv and that airspace is still closed. Secretary Kakdak reminded all Filipinos in the Middle East to continue to always follow the protocols being imposed by their host country to ensure their safety. He added designated residential and government shelters are available and that Philippine embassies and consulates, including MWO personnel, are actively disseminating information.
Dateline Malacañang.
The Department of Agriculture assured that the Philippines will remain food secure amid the ongoing tensions in the Middle East. In a press conference, DA spokesperson Assistant Secretary Arnel de Mesa said the country has a sufficient supply of agricultural commodities, particularly rice. De Mesa said the Philippines has multiple sources of imported rice, including Vietnam, Myanmar, and Cambodia, which are far from the Middle East. According to the Bureau of Plant Industry, as of February 26, 707,711.46 metric tons of imported rice arrived in the country since January, well within the target volume of import arrivals ahead of the local peak harvest season of palay or anhusk rice. Asked about a potential spike in retail prices, De Mesa said it is unlikely to see prices shooting up to 70 pesos per kilo, which was experienced during the previous years due to the Ukraine-Russia crisis. According to the DA, Wednesday, bantay presyo, premium imported rice in Metro Manila sells from 52 pesos per kilo to 62 pesos per kilo as of Wednesday. The price per kilo of imported well-milled rice meanwhile ranges from 43 pesos to 49 pesos per kilo, and imported regular milled rice from 36 pesos to 46 pesos per kilo. Local premium rice is at 43 pesos per kilo to 60 pesos per kilo, while the prevailing prices of well-milled rice and regular milled rice are 45 pesos per kilo and 40 pesos per kilo respectively. The mesa likewise said a supply of other agricultural goods will continue to remain strong. The DA official, however, said that retail prices of agricultural commodities may be affected by movements in global oil prices in the event of a prolonged flow disruption in the Strait of Hormuz. In case of increased freight costs due to fuel spikes, the DA said it will consider providing logistics assistance within the value chain, citing government interventions when the hog sector was affected by African swine fever. The intentions may include providing trucking aid and fuel subsidies, as well as coordination with the Toll Regulatory Board or TRB for discounted toll rates in the movement of agricultural goods. To caution its impact on Filipino consumers, the mesa also assured the availability of more affordable food through its kadiwa ng Pangulo sites across the country.
Dateline Malacañang.
The Commission on Elections, or COMELEC, announced that voter registration in Iran has been temporarily suspended due to tensions in the Middle East. In a statement, COMELEC spokesperson John Rex Laudiango said voter sign-up activities in Tehran is suspended until further notice, per the advice of the Philippine Embassy there. He added that voter registration in Israel is suspended until March 7. On the other hand, the consular services and voter registration in other countries in the Middle East continue to be available for Filipinos. He advised Filipinos in the Middle East to remain vigilant and stay informed about their situation in their respective regions, be cautious of false or misleading information, and rely only on credible sources. Laudianco also advised them to pay close attention to the notices and advisories issued by the Department of Foreign Affairs, as well as the Philippine Embassy or Consulate, and do not hesitate to contact helplines if in distress. Tensions in the Middle East erupted in late February after the United States and Israel launched a major military operation on Iran. In retaliation, Iran fired drones and missiles toward Israel and struck U.S. military facilities in some parts of the region.
Dateline Malacañang.
Malacañang said Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. is seeking the immediate passage of the best version of a measure prohibiting political dynasties in the country. Communications Undersecretary and Palace Press Officer Attorney Claire Castro said President Marcos welcomed the significant progress in the deliberations of the anti-political dynasty bill and is hopeful that the measure would hurdle Congress. Castro said President Marcos has yet to take a position on any specific version of the bill. She said a final version of the measure will undergo a thorough review once it reaches the president's table. Castro also defended President Marcos following Caloocan Representative Edgar Erice's claim that President Marcos was merely posturing in declaring the bill a priority measure. She said President Marcos was serious in declaring the anti-political bill a priority measure.
Bakit naman po kay Pangulo isisisi? Kung ayaw niya ng version sa House of Representatives, di sa pagka nagkaroon po ng pagdebate, debatihin niya po munang mabuti. Ilabas niya na lahat ang kanyang talino. At kung anong kahihinatnan niyan, hindi naman po siyang mag-isa lang ang magdidesisyon niyan. Ang nakakapagtaka po dito kay Congressman Erice, parang lahat na lang ng kasalanan sa mundo, isinisisi niya sa Pangulo. Trabaho po nilang gumawa ng batas. Kaya trabahuhin niya po iyan kung anong gusto niyang version. Katulad nung aking sinabi, yung pinakahuling LEDAC meeting po, yun po talaga ang inuna niya, na gusto niya po itong maipasa. At natuwa nga po siya na umaandar po ito at nung nag-report nga po si si Senator Riza Ontiveros na nagkakaroon na ng public consultation, ang nais lang po talaga ng Pangulo ay mapabilis. At kung ano ang pinakamagandang batas para sa anti-political dynasty bill or rather law, Yan po ang nais ng Pangulo. Wala pa po at pinag-aaralan kung second or fourth, o depende po yan sa magiging version. Ang Pangulo naman po ay pag-aaralan kung ano ang pinakamainam na version at total naman po ay manggagaling ito sa Kongreso. So kapag ka po ito nabuo at naipasa po sa Pangulo, yan po ay pag-aaralan.
The House Committee on Suffrage and Electoral Reforms has approved a consolidated anti-political dynasty measure, principally authored by House Speaker Faustino D. III and House Deputy Majority Leader Sandro Marcos. The approved measure bars spouses and relatives within the second degree of consanguinity or affinity, such as parents, children, siblings, and domestic partners are prohibited from simultaneously holding national or elective posts within the same district, province, city, municipality, or village. Erisa and several members of the Bakabayan bloc criticized the approved bill as weak or watered down, arguing it only regulates political dynasties instead of prohibiting them.
Dateline Malacañang.
Malacañang maintained that threats against Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. should be taken seriously regardless of how they are phrased, emphasizing that intimidation on its own could result in criminal culpability. Communications Undersecretary and Palace Press Officer Attorney Claire Castro made a statement in response to a lawmaker who allegedly called Vice President Sara Duterte's purported criticism of the president hyperbolic and not serious. Duterte said in an internet briefing on November 23, 2024 that she had already hired an assassin to kill President Marcos, First Lady Liza Marcos, and then House Speaker Martin Romualdez if she was killed first. According to Duterte, her order to the suspected hitman she hired to murder Romualdez and the first couple is no joke. Castro, a lawyer, said significant threats under the revised penal code include threatening to commit a crime against another person's person, honor, or property. Impeachment accusations against Duterte include her threat. The two impeachment accusations against the vice president were deemed adequate in form by the House Justice Committee Monday.
Ganyan po talaga ang maaaring maging opinyon ng isang abogado sa isang kliyente. Dito po, total, ang pinag-usapan dito po ay ang buhay ng ating Pangulo, ni First Lady, at idagdag na rin po natin ang dating House Speaker, Martin Romualdez. Hindi seryoso sa kanyang pananaw ang pagbabanta sa buhay ng isang Pangulo. Alam po natin ang kaibahan ng grave threats sa murder, grave threats sa homicide, grave threats sa physical injuries. Ang grave threats, ito po ay sumasaklaw sa pagbabanta na gawan ng isang krimen, ang isang tao, ang kanyang honor o ang kanyang property. It involves threatening another person with infliction of crime in the person, in the honor, and the property of that person being threatened. Seryoso po, kahit biro o hindi biro, ang pagbabanta sa buhay ng isang Pangulo. Kung sa ibang tao, o sabihin na natin, doon sa mga nagsasabing hindi seryoso ang mga salitang patain mo ang isang tao kapag, or I will kill you if, kahit ano pa ang kondisyon niyan, nandoon ang pagbabanta, nandoon ang pagkikreate ng fear and anxiety in the person being threatened, nandoon ang intimidation. Kung sa pamilya kaya nila ito gawin, tumawag ang isang tao at sabihin, I am imagining myself killing you. Hindi ba sila mate-threaten? Nasasabi lamang nila ito dahil hindi sila ang na-threaten.
Communications Undersecretary, Palace Press Officer Attorney Claire Castro.
Dateline Malacañang.
Malacañang warned on Wednesday that publicly voiced fantasies about women might be considered sexual harassment under the law, criticizing a lawmaker's comments that sparked intense criticism. Communications Undersecretary and Palace Press Officer Attorney Claire Castro, in response to inquiries about contentious remarks ascribed to a lawmaker, said such utterances transcend personal opinion. Gender-based sexual harassment on the streets and public places at work and online is illegal by Republic Act 11313, also known as the Safe Spaces Act. Representative Bong Suntay of Quezon City's 4th District has drawn criticism for stating during the House Justice Committee hearing on Tuesday that he experienced desires after meeting actress Ann Curtis. Castro, a lawyer by trade, said that she was offended on behalf of all women when asked if she was personally offended. Castro questioned whether an apology would be enough.
Ang pag-i-imagine o pagpapantasya sa isang babae, kung ito'y nasa isip lamang, hindi natin masasabing ito'y krimen dahil hindi ito naisisiwalat. Nasa puso, nasa utak ng isang lalaki. Pero pag ito'y ibinulalas niya at ipinagmalaki sa publiko ang kanyang pagpapantasya sa isang babae, this is definitely a sexual innuendo. Hindi po ito masasabing walang krimen. The mere fact na sinabi niya to in public, to the public, pertaining to a particular person, it is already covered by Safe Spaces Act. So hindi pwedeng sabihin na walang krimen kung ito'y ibinulalas at ipinagmalaki pa sa publiko ang isang pagpapantasya sa isang babae. Nagawa niya na eh. Consummated na po. Nakita na po natin kung ano ang nasa isip niya, kung paano siya mag-isip, at kung paano siya magkilos kung mayroon siya nakikitang magandang babae. Kababaihan, hindi dapat ginagawang paksa ng malaswa na pananalita. Let us end the culture of objectifying women. Ang kababaihan ay ginagabayan, inaangat, ginagalang, at hindi ginagawang paksa ng walang malaswang pagpapantasya na ipinagmamalaki pa sa publiko, na dapat pa raw na ituring na compliment kapag ginawan ng kalaswaan sa isip ng isang lalaki. At dapat pang ipagpasalamat ito ng isang babae. Nabubuhay tayo sa lipunang kumikilala, gumagalang, nag-aangat, at nagbibigay lakas sa kababaihan. Hindi kami babae lang, babae kami. This is empowering women to empower all women.
Communications Undersecretary, Palace Press Officer Attorney Claire Castro.
Dateline Malacañang.
Finally, for Dateline Malacañang, Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. pledged to push for policies that attract more investments and open new opportunities as he lauded the signing of several business agreements in key strategic sectors between the Philippines and South Korea. Speaking at the Philippines-Korea Business Forum at Conrad Manila in Pasay City, President Marcos assured the South Korean business community of his administration's commitment to advancing government policies to strengthen investor confidence and promote inclusive economic growth for both countries. President Marcos welcomed the agreements between Philippine and South Korean firms aimed at enhancing collaboration in key industries, including shipbuilding, nuclear energy, aerospace, critical minerals, supply chain, and retail and health and wellness.
The business agreements signed earlier today on various industries, including shipbuilding, nuclear energy, aerospace, critical minerals and supply chain and retail, health and wellness, demonstrate our enthusiasm for our private sector to deepen our strong economic relations. All of these will ripple into significant partnerships that will generate projects, investments, and, of course, livelihood. So to our partners from Korea, your investment in the Philippines reflects a strategic and forward-looking decision. This administration remains persistent in its commitment to meaningful reform. We are eradicating bureaucratic barriers, reducing the cost of doing business, and boosting our competitiveness in the global arena. Through the Create More Act, we are opening the door to bigger investments that bring real opportunities to our people. We are supporting qualified projects that invest at least 50 billion pesos or create at least 10,000 jobs. They mean more business rising up, more Filipinos employed, and more families given the chance for a better life.
He said the Philippine government would continue implementing reforms to eradicate bureaucratic barriers, lower the cost of doing business, and boost global competitiveness. President Marcos also emphasized the creation of green lanes for strategic investments to streamline permits and approvals for high-impact projects. President Marcos called for a more balanced trade, strategic, and healthier economic position to drive inclusive growth. He urged South Korean firms to explore investments in priority sectors such as automotive, manufacturing, electronics, and biotechnology, saying these will define the next chapter of our development. He said a business forum provides a platform for industry leaders, innovators, and decision makers to come and build enterprises that create value, generate employment, and uplift communities.
In addition, Executive Order Number 18, Series of 2023, created the Green Lanes for strategic investments. These green lanes streamline permits and approvals for these high-impact projects which we are promoting. Together, these measures form a coherent strategy to create an economy that is dynamic, that is inclusive, and resilient. Let us pursue a more balanced trade strategy and a healthier economic position. Let us channel investments into priority sectors such as automotive manufacturing, into electronics, biotechnology, as these will define the next chapter of our development. Yet even as we speak of growth and competitiveness, let us never lose sight of why we pursue these. Progress finds meaning only when it improves lives. Every policy that we craft, every agreement that we sign must ultimately serve our people. If we remain guided by this principle, then these ventures will open doors of opportunity, nurture aspirations, and empower our citizens to thrive.
President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr.
Dateline Malacañang.
And that is all for today's Dateline Malacañang. For Radyo Pilipinas World Service, this has been Bea Gaza-de Guzman.
From the Presidential Palace, Manila, Dateline Malacañang.